So we're back for the 30-day challenge again on day 3, except day 3, 4, and 5 all kind of correlate and intertwine with each other in my world. So as much as I wanted to do one video a day, I am going to do 3, 4, and 5 all together, a little bit out of order, in order. So I'm going to start with day 5. What event changed history forever? Most important event in my world is the summoning of these 4 elder gods. So each of these gods have a name and they have their own effects on the planet. The first one I'll speak of is Sarnath, the Endless Hunger. So Sarnath is kind of unique in that he is no longer orbiting the planet, but instead embedded himself in the planet. So this large moon-sized meteor, fleshy meteor god crashed into the planet, embedded himself, infesting all inside the planet's crust and underground, and also on the surface, leaving a mile radius gaping maw, a large just mouth, and this began to devour all the souls. Anyone who died, anyone whose spirit left the body, was promptly devoured by Sarnath. The next god is Emerez, the Aberrant Eye. Now, Emerez is cool because he is the reason why there's no more connection to the divine realms. There's no more talking to your gods. There's no more communing with your gods, being bestowed power from your gods. Emerez has cut all that off and instead replaced it with connections to far realm, strange, mutated versions of these gods in order to trick you, in order to cause madness. And it works. He's called the Aberrant Eye because you're seeing an aberration version of your god. So you can no longer speak with Pelor. But if you try, you're going to get something on the receiving end that is a mutated, horrific version of this god. So no more worshiping gods. Divine power now comes from faith. It comes from within. You have belief in your morals, your actions, your alignment. Divine power now comes from within a being himself rather than being bestowed upon them from a god. That's not to say you can't still talk to these mutated versions, and people do, and they go insane. They go crazy. They become crazy priests preaching about Emerez, the Aberrant Eye, and a lot of them actually tear their own eyes out because they believe that Emerez, or whatever god they're still worshiping, will let them see the truth in the void, the truth of the mutation. And, well, it's not the truth. Let's just be real. So before I get into the next 2 gods, let's talk about how these first 2 put in motion the next large event, which is the creation of the Soul Guard. So a quick recap is there is a soul-devouring elder god embedded in the planet, and there is another god stopping all connection to the divine. So the divine casters of the world felt helpless and powerless to do anything, but they felt like they needed to do something. Paladins and clerics and priests and divine casters of all kinds fought their way through the infested lands to reach Sarnath himself. And as they reached the soul-devouring maw in the planet, they surrounded it and performed a ritual that sacrificed themselves and fused their souls together into a large monolithic crystal tower. This tower was so wide at its base, it completely covered Sarnath, blocking off all access to souls, and soared miles into the sky. And the effect of this was that souls were now no longer devoured by Sarnath, but stored inside this crystal tower. This was the first Soul Guard. Most clerics from around the world began to make similar sacrifices and create smaller towers, ad hoc towers in larger cities and towns across the world. And they even have armor adorned with these crystals, therefore they could capture any departed souls and usher them into larger crystals later. So these people are known as the clerics of the Soul Guard, and they're still around to this day. They have outposts everywhere, and they're I'm not going to say the police of the world, but they are there selfless to protect the world from this strange invasion of elder gods. So the next two gods also have their own effects on the world. The third god I'd like to talk about, his name is Nithara, the awakened decay. And now that souls are no longer devoured, they just linger. And Nithara corrupts these souls and causes them to rot and physically manifest into this decay, kind of like Creep from StarCraft. It just slowly spreads. So if a soul is left too long out of the body, if it's left to linger, forgotten about, it'll decay into this corruption that spreads. And it can also be seen in not necessarily a physical, like goopy state on the ground, but it can be seen in the air as well, as just kind of like not as much a tear as an actual tear, but what it is it's leaking from the far plane, this shimmer, this mirage looking type stuff. So it starts, it's very slow. It's slow and methodical. I don't want to say it's sentient, but it does seem to react to things certain ways. Being around this rot, which people in the world called soul rot, being around this soul rot maddens you. You start to go insane. You start to see things. You start to hear things. It definitely affects you to the point where eventually you'll be completely lost to it and will turn into an aberration yourself. So normally when you see soul rot, it is either the start of some sort of creep and you'd like to get rid of as fast as possible. I haven't quite figured out how mechanically you can get rid of the rot. I just know it's get riddable of. But usually when you find large corruption patches of this stuff, you'll find a large creature that is kind of spreading it. This leads me to my last god, which is named Zalatax, the Draconian Oculus. And I'm sure you can understand why it's called that, because dragons in my world didn't exist until the 4 elder gods came, and Zalatax brought them with him. So dragons in my world aren't necessarily the reptilian giant flying lizards that are in normal D&D. They are highly evolved manifestations of chaos. So they just look super crazy and gnarly. They look all rotted and stuff, similar to the soul rot. And they corrupt the world around them. They're very smart, so they don't just go around destroying everything. They do things very slowly. They corrupt villages. They slowly influence, political leaders and things like that. They definitely spread around rot themselves, and if there's large, their layers are just large pits of corruption. So it's kind of hard to fight in their lair, because instead of just sitting on a pile of gold, they're just sitting on a pile of rot and madness. What's cool is their breath weapon is actually like just chaotic breath. It literally just corrupts everything as it touches it, instantly turning things mutated forms and having just completely corrupting things instantly. So quite scary things. I'd like to have some named dragons show up in maybe some monster manual part of my campaign setting book or something. But yeah, so Zalatax, the Draconian Oculus, is what brought dragons to the world. So yeah, that's days 3, 4, and 5. We have the most nefarious villain, which is my 4 elder gods, Saranath, Emerez, Nithara, and Zalatax. The most renowned heroes are the clerics of the Soul Guard, out there doing their best to save the souls and stop the elder gods from messing things up. And the event that changed the world was the summoning of these elder gods and the creation of the Soul Guard. So thanks for watching, and I